Princess Connect Redive is a show that I heard a little about when it was initially airing, but not enough for me to say, hey, I'm going to go check it out. That just didn't seem like it was the wow show that it actually kind of turned out to be for me. And I'm kicking myself because often, even if I don't hear things about a show, I'll still jump in and give it a shot just to see. That's how I've discovered many of my favorite shows over the years. With Season 2 now releasing and seeing it was topping top 10s of most anticipated anime coming out this season, and there was quite a few shows that could have given this one a run for its money. It's not like it was hard to find good anime season or anything like that. I decided I'm going to give episode 1 a shot, see what the buzz is about, and I'm kicking myself for really not discovering this show until now, because for me, it turned out to be the fluffier KonoSuba I didn't know I needed. And don't get me wrong, when I make comparisons to anime, I'm not saying that it's not original or it takes away from the quality of the show. It's just the easiest way to sell it to people, and I've had so many people tell me, yeah, this show, I started watching it because of that description, and I got thanked because of it, because that's exactly what I would have been doing if I would have heard that this is a fluffy KonoSuba, and maybe people were saying that and I just completely overlooked it, but goddamn, Princess Connect, actually a really good show. Which isn't that surprising when you look at the history of Cygames and how they produce their anime, because all their productions, either if they're getting studios like MAPPA to do the first season of Rage of Bahamut, or they're making them themselves with their in-house team. Ultimately, anime is anime. It's not supposed to just be a simple commercial for their mobile games. And from what I hear, their mobile games are good, but often when you get like gacha adaptation or mobile game adaptations, it feels like a simple commercial to the game. Where with them, they take the characters and they take the setting, the world, and the abilities, and they just craft an anime story. And from what I know about the first season of Princess Connect, it actually doesn't really follow the game's story, which I heard the game does get dark at multiple points, and while there is these moments of darker elements for sure, mostly it's a slice of life about a gourmet guild who ends up in these ridiculous, hilarious shenanigans, and at times pretty violent shenanigans. But it never tries to just be like, hey, we're just trying to make you go play the game. Rather, this story stands on its own legs as an anime, and if you wanted more of the characters, you got a game that I heard has a great story as well. This show kind of boils down into like a slice of life adventure that never slows down, because ultimately you have a main character, Yuki, who wakes up with barely any memories, who is probably the most dense character you're going to see in some time because of his amnesia. He gets wrapped up in these shenanigans where, like, the first episode, he's getting dragged off by wolves, like, multiple points, as you have someone like Kokoro, who is supposed to be, like, the one serving under her lord, and she makes these adorable X-mouth faces at every possible moment. It pretty much is just like you build a party with all these anime design characters, but it feels like a very lighthearted show that knows when to be serious, but for the most part is pretty lighthearted. You have the central cast, which is Kokoro, who is Yuki's kind of like number one servant, or at least that's how she kind of presents herself. A super sweet, angelic-like character who has some of the best reactions I've seen in anime. Yuki, who doesn't say a whole lot, and when he does, he's not the most intelligent of characters given the amnesia, but they tease you enough to make you say, oh, there's some history here. What caused him to lose his abilities? Why is he a hero? What is his magical abilities? He's gotta have some. As you get this kind of like goddess, kind of like some sort of character anyway, trying to like tease this story in our face. As then you have Carl, who was originally supposed to be a pretty violent character in terms of her introduction, but then gets kind of roped into this gourmet guild, and when it comes time to sit back and observe and watch the carnage, she decides that, you know what, she really respects the kind of relationships that she's built along this journey, and you get some nice little sweet character moments with her, as then you have Priconne, who is just a glutton, but she's a badass glutton. She can swing a sword and kick some ass, but ultimately she wants to fill your stomachs first and foremost. This core group of characters makes it so it's always entertaining. It's always hilarious watching Yuki get dragged off in the mouth of some wild beast, to the oh my god moments. Like, there's probably my favorite episode in the season is when Yuki gets a rash, and ultimately, like anyone should, if something unexpected happens to your body, you want to get it checked out by a doctor. Unfortunately for Yuki, he ends up going to a yandere hospital where there's bloody handprints across every nook and cranny, as you have a character who was once this hulking beast earlier in the season who wanted to shut down the restaurant that one of the characters was working at, because he didn't like the look of the food, and then got a fist to the face because Priconne just refuses to let anyone talk bad about the food. You then see him almost like he's starving Marvin from South Park, and you're like, what in the actual hell happened to him that this once fat, obese man turned into someone who looked like he never picked up a hamburger in his entire life? As you have these yandere situations, and my boy Yuki almost gets tortured in a marriage, and I'm like, this show can go from goofy wolves dragging off characters gag to cute shenanigans to holy shit, that is the most psychotic character I've seen in some time. And I think because rather than it just trying to be like an epic grand quest, like maybe the story in the game is, but for the anime, it's simply just these characters are building relationships, they're building a bond and a guild, and that guild is basically cooking food and taking up missions that should just be harvesting, that in return ends up being you're fighting Shadows of the Damned here. And when it's not trying to be funny, it has moments of some of the best looking animation you're gonna see for an action scene, because Cygames doesn't rush out their projects. They make sure they're properly funded, they have the time to flesh things out. Most anime studios, if they had a successful first season, they would pump it out in a season 2 a year later, maybe even a little less, where Cygames is fine taking 2 or 3 years at times to make another season. They want their projects to not be stressful, and they have a very Kyoto Animation business model of treating their animators right, and their in-house staff is properly trained and funded. It's just very consumer and worker friendly, and that's why I've always respected their business model. And even the shows that may not be for me, I've always accepted that, hey, I may not personally like the show in question, but I know damn well it was made with passion, and the workers actually weren't rushed and, whipped like mules. Almost more often than not, that if your mom walked in and saw you watching the show, she's probably not gonna, call up the local priest to, make sure your sins are no longer there. It definitely has fan service. I mean, there's definitely some very seductive outfits, but it never feels like that's what the character is. Like, some of these characters are just designed sexy, and that's perfectly acceptable, as you just have all their individual personalities really shine. And around the midway point of the season, the side cast actually gets kind of enlarged, and it's hard not to say, every character was interesting in some way, whether it was sister trying to save another sister because she doesn't want to see her pulled into the depths of hell. You have Rima over here, who just, the character design speaks for itself. It's just hard not to have a grin watching this show. And just when you think it can't get more silly with the comedy, they find new ways to up the ante. But ultimately, you get to see the main cast build these bonds over the seasons, and you feel like immediately, before even reaching halfway through the season, I was like, I need a season 2. And then I was reminded, oh shit, I'm watching this to begin with because it is having a season 2 airing this season. It just feels like whether it wants to be slow, there's something funny happening, and then it has this incredible fight scenes where there isn't a dull-looking moment in this show, from gorgeous background designs. I mean, the building designs themselves are different than most fantasy series. They're not blocky, they're kind of rounded with these nice edges. The character designs all pop off on screen. You can understand why people would want to roll for characters if they look like them, because they're so creative and different. It doesn't feel like a copy and paste with just a different color on the character design. But the animation, when it comes to those high-octane moments, I mean, shit, from laser blast swords to even just the creativity of some of the fighting. There's this one character who can basically, phase through objects and other people, and the way the swords clash and they detail it. Super cool little details that just add so many extra elements to an already visually stunning show. I mean, Princess Connect, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who absolutely hates it. I can understand it. People say, oh, the comedy just wasn't for me, so therefore I found it a little boring. But to true unhate it, I think would be very difficult, because it has a lot of jokes, it has some great action, but ultimately it has some great character building, especially with characters like Carl and just where she goes over the season. So safe to say, I'm excited to start reviewing season 2, but I just want to get my thoughts out on just my experience with season 1. I could probably gush about this show for another 10 minutes, but I'll cut it short here. Thoughts and feelings, whether you are newer to the show like myself, haven't seen it yet, but now you might want to check it out, or you've been a big fan of this show for some time. Let me know what you thought of the first season down below, leave a like if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you're new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.